Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first episode of What's the Future? I'm so excited to have all of you here. I want to have a quick look to make sure you want to give us a little bit of love and make sure everybody can see our picture quickly before we get going. Just quickly in the chat section. Thank you so much. All right, guys. I just want to start by saying thank you to each and every one of you who have made this live. This is so exciting to be doing this, to be part of this with you. Awesome. So just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Sham. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Suits and Sneakers. And today I'm your host as I'm part of this What's the Future webinar series, the first episode with John Sanei. And this entire production, the entire concept is not only brought to you by Suits and Sneakers, but actually really brought to you by Amazon Web Services and Talk IT. So I have a little bit of time just to intro you and just to get ready as we wait for some people to come through. I have the privilege and the honor of just giving you a little bit of context and just sharing a little bit about the why with you and where we're at and what we're thinking. So let me just start once again by saying thank you so much to each and every one of you for being part of it. I just want to see where we're at. We've got quite a staggering number. First and foremost, we had about 2,000 people register for this webinar, which is just exceptional. And I think it's for good reason, to be honest with you, largely because of the content. So I want to just start by sharing a little bit about what you can expect, why we've put this together, all the little details, and then we're going to get going with John in about 5 minutes. The starting point that I think is best to go with is a few weeks ago, I got a phone call from the people at Talk IT, and they had this idea for a webinar event, and they wanted me to speak on it originally. After a Zoom call or two, we got chatting about the concept, and before I know it, this webinar event turned into a webinar series, which I think is absolutely the right call. And one of the first things that we decided as we started putting this webinar series together was around the content. The priority was, how can we look at these episodes and the content that we push through it as a way of adding value to people on the other end? So everything that you're about to experience from today onward, we've picked 5 speakers to speak over the next 5 weeks. And the idea is that these guys will be touching on content that we hope adds value to you across the board. Obviously, right now, we are experiencing quite a crazy time because of COVID. This is unprecedented. And so the strategies that we need to employ are brand new. There's no guidebook for this. And so we've tried to find 5 different speakers who are not only educating on these topics, but entertaining and just generally there to add value to you. So even though this is brought to you by Amazon Web Services and Talk IT, and these are 2 companies that are very tech focused, and there will absolutely be time to talk about tech, we're really trying to aim the collective content at value creation. And that's really the story. So because of the times that we're facing, we wanted to bring you this content, but we also wanted to do it with you in a studio format. We wanted to try to do this in a way that I guess adds value and ups the production quality. So I really want to just give a big love to a company called Tycoon Tribe. There are 2 gentlemen behind the scenes named Nico and Mike, who we are recording this webinar episode with today in a studio. The aim is, we know, I've been part of, I don't know, probably 50 webinars since lockdown began. And sometimes it can be really difficult to focus when you're just looking at the screen. So we knew that at the very least, we needed to try up the production quality of the setup. That said, our first guest today, being John Sanei, is on his family's farm in Makhubuskloof, which is in another province. Our aim originally was to make sure that we had every guest in studio, but as you know, #lockdown, and we can't move between provinces. So our first episode today will be broadcast with John being on his family farm in Makhubuskloof and myself in studio. But in future episodes, all our guests will be available from studio where possible. Unless something shifts, most of the guests will be here in studio with us. So with that said, there is quite something to be said for this studio setup. Let me tell you, it's a daunting thing when you're going through multiple camera angles. Just so you can see, you're looking at me in wide angle right now. Do you guys want to cut there? This is me looking at close up, and then you want to quickly shoot to our screen. We've got Nico and Mike literally live editing this. in an attempt to raise the quality of the production. So a lot of what we're bringing to you from concept to studio and everything in between is an experiment. And I want you to receive it in the spirit as such. I guess nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I've learned with technology that sometimes you can have really good days and really bad days. So I want to just quickly check one last time. Can we quickly go to the chat section? Can you give us a little bit of let me know, give me a bit of a notification that you're all here, that you're part of it. Give us a little love, say, oh, look at that chat section having an absolute go. Okay, so I think I've given you pretty much everything you need to know. I absolutely value your time and we want to get going. Like I said to you, what's the Future webinar series brought to you by Amazon Web Services and Talk IT. We managed to create a concept that discussed value creation before sales. And that's where we were at today. So the first guest that we have, as you know, is a good friend of mine named John Sanei. I wanted to tell you a little bit about him, both a little bit about his credentials, but also why I thought it was so important to start the series off with him. Myself and John go way back in the world of speaking and events. John is he's an enigma, really. He's a bunch of things. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's an entrepreneur, you name it, he's done it. He's had a full go in his lifetime. And really, he's become a thought leader, even though that word sounds a little bit swear wordy. He really is one of those people that is able to think about things very originally. And when we were conceptualizing this series together, I really wanted to go with John to kick off because the times that we're facing, as we mentioned before, are absolutely unprecedented. And I can't think of a better human being to kick off a series to help us think about a number of things. One being, what the hell is going on? How do we prepare for what's happening emotionally? How do we prepare strategically? How do we think about business? Where to from here? How do we let go of the old and think about the new? This is something that I don't think anybody understands better than my good friend John Sanei. So I, for one, outside of the fact that he is a faculty member at Duke, at Singularity University, the fact that he's written 3 books, that he's a global speaker that speaks all around the world. Above all of that, John is the #1 person that I tend to go to when these crazy times hit. He has a way of framing things in such a beautiful perspective that helps shift things in my head. So I really hope that you're excited. I just want to have one last look at where we're at. This is great, guys. We're sitting on just under about 1,000 people live, which I think is quite something. So thank you to each and every one of you for being part of this. I can't say thank you enough. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is bring my dear friend, John, on screen. John, could you just give us a hand there and unmute? Why don't you just say a little hello quickly before anything else?
How's it? Here, can you see me?
Let's have a look. Won't you guys just make sure in the chat section? John, over to you.
Okay, great. What's up? How's it going? Thank you so much, Mark. Well done for becoming a TV presenter overnight. So congratulations to you. I've been watching what you've been doing. So thank you for setting this up. I can see from all the chats that people are very excited about this, and well done for putting this together, and well done for getting Amazon and iTalk to do this with you. And so congratulations to you. Thank you for having me as your first guest.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to have you here. When you and I were discussing where to from here and how we should go about this, because you are sitting on your family's farm in Kloof, you were the one who suggested that maybe what we do is literally just talk around a discussion and a conversation. And I couldn't think of anything better to kick off with. So really what I want to do is, before I get into anything, I just want to set a scene with you. The title of your talk, the conversation, etc., is called Future Now. Do you want to just give us a little insight as to what Future Now is all about? And then we can get into the philosophy of things, etc. Just share that with us.
So look, I think we all finding ourselves in unprecedented times. And what I wanted to start doing was writing books so that we could help as many people guide themselves through this process. But ultimately, I've already got 2 questions in the Q&A box. But ultimately, what we must do is stop looking for certainty. It has dissolved. Nobody can preempt what's coming. Nobody can predict what's coming. And the only thing we can predict is our behavior, is the way we come at this future that's so uncertain. So do you want me to dive into my philosophy around COVID, Mark?
Absolutely. I think just for everybody watching, that gives you a nice brief. I want to set that scene exactly. Give us the absolute idea of the things that we all need to know, regardless of what we do, who we work for, etc. I'd love to hear your philosophy on where we're at and where we're going.
Great. Thank you. So really great to be here, and thank you so much for your time. As Mark has said, Mark and I have shared many stages together. We've also shared a couple of digital stages together, but this is the first one that we're doing like this. So let's get cracking. Welcome to the future. Welcome to the future where both your dreams and your reality become true. Welcome to the world where it's not so much survival of the fittest, it is now survival of the quickest. Welcome to the world where it's not so much about efficiency anymore, but about robustness. Thank you so much for allowing this new world to start shifting the way we look at the world. And it's important for us to understand that your new superpower becomes your ability to do fundamental paradigm shifts, both in your personal skill sets as well as your business's one. And welcome to the world where the supply and demand business model is being disrupted by 6 new business models. And we'll get into them a little bit later with Mark. This coronavirus has shaken the foundations of our social and economic coexistence indefinitely. We are experiencing an uncontrollable collapse of everyday life as we know it. What happens now will change the way we do business, structure our societies, run our governments, the way we work, the way we collaborate, the way we consume, the way we spend, what we spend on, the way we travel, and the way we educate ourselves all at once. This unprecedented global crisis is an opportunity to prepare ourselves for the collective future we want, rather than the one which was an overheated industrial revolution trying to keep up with this new quantum, dynamic, multifaceted world. And I see a lot of people desperate to go back to normal. And before we are desperate to get back to normal, I want us to realize and remind ourselves what normal was. Normal had most of us in a state of anxiousness, most of us in a state of exhaustion. We had an ecosystem and an earth around us that was crumbling in its nature and ecosystems. Most of us did not spend enough time with our families. Most of us did not spend enough time in our communities. So we must become clear that normal isn't something we should be rushing towards. But as human beings, this need for familiarity is something that sits deep in our psychology. And it's not just about running back to normal in this world. It's just think about the relationships you have in your life. And if you just think of maybe about your adult romantic relationships, many of them could actually be very similar to your parents' relationships. And the reason for that is that we don't look for love, we look for familiarity. And so also we are seeing this need for familiarity all the time amongst us right now for this life. And so we justify this need for familiarity based on the stories that we are being taught by our families, taught by our societies, and taught by our schools. Mark, I see the video is lagging. What should we do?
No, it's all good. It's all good. I'm looking at you and everything's good. So I'll jump in if there's a problem. You just go for it. This is
okay. So they're saying sound is good, but it was lagging. Okay, so I'll carry on. Okay, the video is not lagging. Hey Kira, how's it? Okay, anyway, let's keep going. So the reason we are all moving into this desperation for familiarity is because of the stories we've been taught. And these stories that we've been taught are really the basis of what makes us human beings successful in what we do. Because stories allow us to transfer knowledge from generation to generation. But be very aware that the stories we tell ourselves, to the ones we listen to and the ones we believe in, have a profound effect on our perspectives. Whether it's just a fairy tale or a moment that you keep recounting over yourself over and over, stories stay with us. The problem is, though, that these stories take on a life of their own. They move from whisper to wisdom, from fantasy to folklore, and to the most dangerous place that they could be, to the point where it's called, that's how we've always just done it. And that's what I want to speak about, because that's just how we've always done it is not good enough in this new world that we're moving into. Rushing back to familiarity and the norm is not good enough in the world that we're moving into. We need to rethink the paradigm at which we were actually living. And some of these major stories we're telling ourselves today are just plain outdated. The way we measure success is plainly outdated. What we have to realize is that the rules of economic doctrine of growth over everything else was very much based on an industrial revolution type of thinking. Today, we live in an abundant world. We don't live in a scarce world. Just think about communication right now. Most of us, this is costing us almost nothing to be communicating. Whereas before, communication used to cost so much money. But it's difficult to try and tell people that the story we're living in must be changed. Because if you do try and challenge a societal story, you're seen as crazy, as mad, as radical. But if I just remind you of the stories that we come from, that we today think are ridiculous and disgusting, we'll start to realize there's another story we're living right now that needs to be questioned. Think back to 150 years ago when we had slavery. It was so normal, slaves thought it was normal. Think back to when women weren't allowed to vote 110 years ago, and that was normal. I think back to 40 years ago when we had child labor camps, when children were in factories working. And just 25, 27 years ago here in South Africa, we had apartheid. Every single one of these are disgusting. And the reason that we carried on doing them was because of the stories we kept telling ourselves. So before we get stuck into the talk today with Mark, I want us to rethink the story that we are all desperate to get back to. Let's try and understand what we could do better, what we could do by letting go of. And so if you think back and look at history, you'll see in the 14th century, there was the Black Death that devastated most of Europe. And because of this devastation, it ended their capitalism, which was called feudalism. And this end of feudalism saw an incredible growth in the agriculture of technologies of agriculture, in the way we were doing sort of labor technologies. All of this started growing because feudalism had ended, and it saw the birth of the Italian Renaissance. And for the very first time in the 16th century, we started celebrating art and knowledge and beauty instead of just being in that sort of feudalistic economic system that they had there. So instead of us becoming desperate for answers, I really want all of us collectively to start asking new questions about what the new possible future could look like. What parts of our past can we take with us, and what parts of our past should we not take with us? And the new questions, we should start with, how do we fix things? Not why is it like this? So instead of us asking why, which keeps us in the past, we should be asking how. How do we collectively rethink a future? In fact, I think it's our collective responsibility to ask as many hows as possible while we're in this pause together. To gather as many insights as possible, and to answer as many new questions as possible, to discover a new path as we move into a world post-COVID-19. So the big question we need to ask today is, are we ready to be part of the Renaissance, or are we holding on to old stories? Are we willing to poison our rivers, dirty our skies, and suffocate our children for profit? Are we able to ask a new, bolder, and more courageous question? And ultimately, all of us need to adopt a fluid, interconnected, oceanic mindset to be able to answer the biggest question we have today. How are we going to develop a world
Okay, I think we've just momentarily lost John there. Let's just make sure. John, if you can hear us or see us, we're going to get back there. I think your points are absolutely valid. I can certainly comment we've caught him. You might just have to, John, if you're off there, you might just have to get back. I think it's really important to, you just have to restart. Good old John over there. This is what happens when you're stuck in Mkhubus Cliff in Mpumalanga. This is something I've been thinking about for quite some time. Exactly what John says. You know, I can just iterate while we wait for John to come back. There's a few things to really keep in mind. We tell ourselves stories all the time about the world. So you're not strange for taking a certain moment or occasion and reframing it like COVID to your benefit. You know, I often think about the stories that we tell ourselves that are quite practical. Take money. Money is a great example, right? You don't really see apes or chimps swapping bananas for printed pieces of paper. Money is very much a story that all human beings tell ourselves about the world. And with enough of us agree on it, it becomes reality. It's a lot like companies, right? You think about if I go and register a brand new PTY Limited today, we are actually giving that company its own personality, its own rights. It's crazy. And then we recognize that it has a certain, I guess, roles and responsibilities it has to take. And if you even think about countries for a second, if you go into space and you look down on Earth, you don't see those dotted lines that represent borders. We've made that up. That's a story that we tell ourselves. The idea of the United States of America is just a story, as is Canada, as is Mexico. We've just created these stories. So I can absolutely resonate with John and what he's saying there. I don't know what's happened on his feed, but I'm sure he'll be back shortly. I can absolutely resonate with what he's saying in terms of this COVID-19 pandemic that's upon us, whether you think it is as intensive as it is or isn't, has had an absolute impact on the economy. It's had an impact on the world around us. I guess everybody's impacted in some format. And so we can either look at this very bitter, the way we approach these things, the story that we tell ourselves in our head about the world matters everything. We can either tell ourselves a story that this form of pain is going to be great for us moving forward, or we can sit in a space of victimhood where we really tell ourselves that this is horrible and we just want to go back as quickly as possible. But I will say one thing. I think that this has given us a chance, a huge chance for us to reset, a massive chance. So I want to just leave that there for 2 seconds. I just want to quickly check in with what's happening here. If you'll just give me 1 second, participants over here. We're just waiting for John to boot back up. John and I have spent a little bit of time. I just want to make sure that he is coming back. This is technology for you. You rebooting. This is what we do. We work on the fly. The one point that I want to add to what, oh, there you go. Sorry. Well, I might as well just, don't you stress your cotton socks there, lover boy. Okay. That's technology for you. John, I think you were finishing off with a crescendo there. You were really just finishing off about the choices that we have. Am I correct? Over to you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I ended off with saying we have the biggest opportunity to ask a new question about the world we're moving into. And I think the world is so desperate for familiarity and certainty. And those two things need to be questioned. We need to be able to ask a new version, a new opportunity to rethink what the new world needs to look like. And to be honest with you, we don't have the answers. Nobody has the answers. The point is we need to be able to get a conversation moving that gets us this opportunity to ask the new questions. So for me, it's about stop looking for certainty. Stop looking for specific answers. Start asking new questions. We all need to become part of the new way of what the future looks like. Mark?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for quite some time. And just before we jump to the next section, I think it's a fair point. You mentioned that people are so thriving to go back to what we used to deem as normal. And there really is no such thing. But one of the things that I've taken note is really that when we were younger, we weren't really trained in the ways of understanding our relationship with pain. Would you agree? Like we haven't received that emotional training even from young to understand that pain is a precursor for growth. I think it's a big thing to speak about. I don't want to hop over it, is this idea of so many people sitting in victimhood because they want to go back to what they deem to be normal. I agree with you. The story that we're telling ourselves, we're not realizing that this is a chance to reset. Your thoughts?
So look, I think it's really important for us to tackle this point, because I think this point is at the fundamental approach and perspective management that we have. You see, this COVID-19 has triggered us on a very personal survivor consciousness barometer. And we have a very clear choice. Do we come at this from a point of poor me, or do we come at this from a point of what do I do now and what new value do I add? So for me, it's about two things. One, do we give ourselves the time, the gift of mourning our future memories? And before I explain how to go about doing that, let's just try and understand that memories are both from the past and from the future. And so when you have ever broken up with somebody or gone through a divorce, the thing that you mourn are the future plans that you had with each other. And those have all dissolved. And we have all collectively around the world, all 7.5 billion of us, lost our futures. No matter how frivolous they were, whether it was just buying a pair of new shoes, or was going to a friend's birthday at a restaurant, or if it was just or even getting married, all of this has been canceled. And so what we have to do is give ourselves the gift of time to mourn our future memories. Now, the 5 stages of mourning are very well documented. They're all over the internet, but they are initially denial, bargaining, anger, grief, and acceptance. And if we find ourselves waiting for things to go back to normal, whatever normal way of being, we are then stuck in bargaining and denial. And if we are stuck in bargaining and denial, we aren't able to catalyze ourselves to become a creator, not a victim. And so if you find yourself in any of these 3 characters or characteristics, you're stuck in victimhood. Now, before I tell you about it, is you must realize that our lives are made up of multiple parallel aspects. So for example, your body, the way you speak to your body could come from a place of victimhood or creator. Money, career, relationships, intimacy, government, power, any of these things are all defined in parallels that affect our personality. And we can approach each and every one of them from either a victim mindset or a creator mindset. So when I started writing my book, FutureNOW, I started to realize how many aspects of my life I am stuck in victimhood, because you don't really realize it unless you really start to look at the characteristics. So there are 3 characteristics that keep us in the drama triangle. And so the first characteristic is the poor me. Oh, poor me. I can't believe this has all happened to me. The world is against me. Everybody hates me. Poor me. The second characteristic is the savior. I have to look for people that are doing badly and I must try and help them. And most of these people are just sitting on their computers feeling bad for themselves and the world out there. They're not actually doing anything to help them, because if they were, they wouldn't have time to be sympathetic. They'd be empathetic. And that's a different one, but we'll get to that now. And the third characteristic of the victim mindset is anger. I'm angry with the government. I'm angry with the dollar rand price. I'm angry with the Chinese. I'm just angry with everybody, because what anger does, it stops me from taking any responsibility. And so what we do, if we are going through, please save me, who can I save, and angry with the world, those 3 characteristics keeps you in the drama triangle. If you want to become a creator, if you want to see this as an opportunity to redefine who you are and what you come out to the world with and what impact you want to have, you change poor me to what can I do in this new world? How can I bring about new impact and new skills and new ways to add value to the world? And instead of feeling sympathetic, you feel empathetic, meaning I want to empower people to get better rather than feel sorry for them. Best example of this is Oprah. She doesn't feel sorry for women. She empowers women. Totally different game. And the third one, instead of being angry, you challenge. You challenge yourself to be better, and you challenge your community and people around you to be better rather than angry. Because angry, feeling sorry for yourself and looking to save people, takes all the responsibility away from you. So the future requires us to become creators. It requires us to mourn our future memories. And when we combine this two, we become anti-fragile. And anti-fragile is not my term, it's from Nassim Taleb. And he writes about this concept that if you're fragile and you drop, you break. But if you're anti-fragile, you drop, you get stronger. And so this opportunity now that COVID has given us is, how is this making you stronger? How are you redefining yourself? And if you can get through feeling sorry for yourself and get through the drama triangle, Now you're ready. Now you're excited. And now you can create something really amazing in the future.
Yeah, it shows you, John. There's something that I just wanted to point out to the viewers, which fascinated me. If we go back to the last major pandemic being the Spanish flu, like on a big scale, they lost an estimate between 50 and 100 million people died. But it's beyond that. We don't realize that we're living in such a beautiful time that gives us such opportunity. If you compare the two, the Spanish flu and Corona, in the Spanish flu, you had an instance where people didn't even know what it was. They thought it was evil spirits invading the world. They would have these prayer meetings, which would only then, unfortunately, the irony of coming together, it would spread this thing. Fast forward to 2020, we have this huge abundance because of technology. Look at what we're able to do right now with each other. In 2020, the coronavirus hits. We are able to sequence the genome of COVID-19 in under 2 weeks and create a reliable test to work out if people have it or not. We're able to lock down and communicate these messages using the internet and all these forms of communication, and it costs us nothing. And many people were literally able to work from home. It was almost seamless. And of course, there have been many people that have been hurt in between. But it just shows you that even during this time, we can either focus on what we've lost, or we can focus on this abundance that technology is bringing about. I think this is probably such a great example. So I want to kind of lead in here. I believe that we could spend hours on the mentality. I think your points are absolutely valid. It's the idea that the story that we're telling ourselves right now matters everything. And so the number one thing we have to do before we look or think about anything is, what is the story that we're telling ourselves with regards to the opportunities, the victimhood, etc. I want to kick on from a practical perspective, and I want to just hear your thoughts from a business perspective, etc. You are known for talking a lot about future trends, etc. COVID's obviously come in and it has disrupted the world in many forms. Do you want to talk a little bit about the opportunities available to us? Also, the future of consumer spending, how business is going to look from here, getting a bit more practical?
Oh, great. I think understanding consumer behavior becomes imperative in when we start to design new businesses. And because it's not just about taking your linear business model and digitizing it, because that's not good enough. It's like taking a textbook and putting it on an iPad. That's really not cutting it in this new world that we're in right now. And so we've got to realize that consumers are wanting and are desperate for three things: more personalization, more seamlessness, and more trust. No matter what you're selling, those are the three things that we are loving. So if you look at a brand, for example, like Spotify, they practice a business model I call curate, match, and facilitate. They curate music, they match it to you based on data and machine learnings, and they facilitate it to you for $5 a month. Now imagine that the way you were educated, the clothes that you wore, the food that you wore, who you dated, was all brought about by curate, match, and facilitate, which is really what all of us are desperate for if you think about it. Now, if we think about this concept that all of us now, no matter what kind of business we do, we are now competing with everything else on this little electronic box. You're all watching me on an electronic box. This same electronic box that you watch me on also has TikTok, also has YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and these options are dynamic, multifaceted, multi-moving. They're like constantly energized ways of entertaining us. So we have lost our ability for long-term focus, and we like things in much more bite-sized ways about doing it. So if you think about just one example that I really love is an example from Quibi. And Quibi is the future of entertainment, because we all right now are enthralled with Netflix, but I have a major problem with Netflix. Netflix have digitized a linear movie options. For example, if you had to go to a DVD store, the world's biggest DVD store, Netflix took that DVD store and put it online. And so now, for a very small amount of money, we can access the world's biggest DVD store. But the problem with Netflix is that it takes you longer to choose what you want to watch than actually watching anything. Why? Because so much choice isn't actually what we want. We want it to be curated, matched, and facilitated to us in the right way, which is bite-sized, quick, intelligent, and suggestive rather than choice. So Quibi, going back to Quibi. Quibi is a brand new platform that's coming out of America. That's got people like Steven Spielberg attached to it. And so Quibi is taking on the Netflix concept of curating, matching, and facilitating information and entertainment that we love, as well as, and this is really important, they realize that most movies and TV shows are being watched on your phone. And because we're on the go and on the phone, well, we are not on the go right now, but when things get back to normal, we'll be on the go again. So we're watching things on the phone. So what they've decided to do is that, how do we want to watch entertainment, whether it's a documentary, a news channel, sports, or a movie or a series? What is it that we want to do in our phones? And how do we consume it because of our phones? And so if you take your phone, and every TV show that is filmed on Quibi is filmed with a cell phone. 2 cell phones, 1 cell phone like this and 1 cell phone like this. So if you look at the behind the scenes, all the scenes are filmed like this, which means that when you watch the show, you can watch it from this angle or this angle or this angle, right? So 3 things that I thought were mind-blowing about Quibi, which gives us an idea that we need to make things for the medium that it's being used from. So Quibi does these three things. Steven Spielberg does a series called After Dark, and After Dark is a thriller. The first thing, your phone won't let you watch the series until after dark. So if you want to watch it during the daytime, it won't let you because your phone knows if it's daytime or nighttime. That's the first thing, because it wants to create the ambience of the thriller. The second thing is, if you watch the series in this format, you can see a big scene of the guy trying to break into the lady's house, and there's all this drama and sort of a thriller that's happening. And then when you turn your phone this way, she's phoning the police on FaceTime. So it's her talking to the police, and then you turn your phone like that, and then all of a sudden you see the big screen, the big scene. So you understand that the future of how we bring our products and services to the market isn't just about taking what you've always done offline to bring it online. That's not successful, as we can see with Netflix, because if somebody comes in with a suggestion that makes it easier for us to choose what to watch, we'll all rush towards it, because it's not quality and choice that's actually leading. The second example, again, is Spotify. And Spotify has changed the way people make music. So Spotify only pays its musicians after you've listened to a song for longer than 30 seconds. And so what have musicians done? They've now started to write songs with the jingle in the first 30 seconds of the song, and the songs end at around 2 minutes, 50 seconds. All of a sudden, now what you have is a much shorter song, consumed more often by more people, but in a much shorter space. And that's how musicians are actually changing the game there. So whatever product you're doing or whatever service you're in, don't just think about digitizing it, but really contextualize the way it's being consumed. And so consumers in the future, and even now, are desperate for more personalization, more convenience, and more trust. Mark?
Yeah, that's great. I think what you're really pointing to there that really resonates with me is things have obviously shifted very quickly. I just think about this medium as an example. I actually tried to host a bunch of webinars pre-COVID, but people just weren't in the mindset of it. They still wanted to come to a physical event where you saw the speaker face to face. And in a beautiful way, a strange but beautiful way, what COVID has done is accelerate our adoption of technologies. Like, look at us doing this now. We've got like 1,000 people logging on. I don't know if this would have been possible pre-COVID. It's definitely accelerated it. And with that comes incredible opportunities for where we can go from here. But it also requires a mindset shift. And I think about it in 2 ways. One, I'm just resonating what you're saying back to me. First, we have to get our mental and our emotional state correct. We have to think about clearly how we're approaching things before we start this. And then we need a mindset shift from the perspective of technology and what it enables. There's a bit of an education process here. And I think the beauty of it is being in a state of constant experimentation. John, I want to talk to you because we've got about 10 minutes left before we go to Q&A. And I want to spend at least 10 minutes doing Q&A. I want you to just share with me a little bit. What I was trying to get out of this session today is also for people to get a bit of insight into the future of something like work. You know, obviously COVID's come through and it's changed things dramatically. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts on this idea and the nature of what is the future of work look like to you?
So great question. I think what we've got to realize is that the world we come from, the Industrial Revolution, is all about productivity, efficiency, and profitability. It was an incredible thing back in the early 1900s when people started to realize that the more efficient and more productive they could be, the more profitable they could become. And I think that was really excellent, because in the world that we came from, we had a world of scarcity. Today with digitization, we're living in a world of abundance. And I've spoken much about this level of abundance, and there's much literature out there that you can go read, how much more access more of us have as humanity to more things like information and like many other things like education, entertainment, communication, and those sort of things. But we've got to realize that the Industrial Revolution required us to play certain roles to be the cogs in the machine. So in other words, initially the Industrial Revolution was a factory line. So you needed a person that was able to be part of the production line. That factory line became a corporation, and those corporations required certain roles to be filled. Now, how do those roles get filled? You had school, and school trained you up with the subjects that were necessary to fill you into the roles of the Industrial Revolution. And then what else happened is you could further specialize by going and getting a degree. Because what you did was you realized what your aptitude was or what the market needed, and then you'd go study, become an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, whatever the roles were. And if you think about universities now around the world, they all teach the same thing. So now what you have in the world is what I call the surplus society. So you now have a surplus of very clever people. Because how many great accountants do you know? How many great engineers do you know? How many great doctors do you know? How many great lawyers do you know? And so you have just a surplus of clever people. All have been trained in the same way. And what we need to do is realize that the world we come from, filling in one of those roles was fantastic because it guaranteed you some level of success. But today, it's become commoditized. If you don't want your job as an accountant, there's another 500 people behind you waiting to become an accountant. And this is before even these companies that are hiring people become non-geographic. Because when you start building distributed teams and not just working from an office, now you get access to millions of more accountants from around the world. And some people will be cheaper and smarter than you. And now what you're doing is you're competing against millions of people. So what you want to do in the world of work that's coming, what I believe is we're moving into an era called forced entrepreneurship, is that no company can now guarantee you a job, because it's not that they're being horrible, they just can't guarantee the job because the market's changing so quickly. And so what we have to realize is that you also don't want to be in a world that's being commoditized. So it doesn't matter how clever you are as an engineer, there's just too many people like that around. So what you have to do, for me and the research that I've been doing, because of the power of the internet, we will then start celebrating uniqueness, not fitting in, becoming the machine, not a cog in the machine. And so what we start realizing now is we have got 5 billion people connected to the internet. Soon there'll be 7.5 billion people. Smartphones are costing from $10 now. So they're becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Access to communication is becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So soon enough, all our lives will be interconnected with the internet nonstop. What you need to do is figure out what most excites you, what really is your curiosity, dive deep into that, come out of it on the other side as a thought leader, build a tribe around your product or service from around the world, the 5 billion people. All you need is 0.00001% of them to give you $1 each for your product and your service. And you're living well, because also remember that the future doesn't require that much, because communication gets cheaper, education gets cheaper, entertainment gets cheaper. And we can see that COVID has brought 2030 to us 10 years too early. And all of a sudden, people are thinking about why they're paying so much money for universities when you're just sitting there listening to a Zoom. And now this is going to start the democratization of just education, for example. So we got to realize that the world we're moving into is not just an industrial revolution on turbocharge. It's a new paradigm. There's new ways to go about adding value. And we need to utilize the access of the internet in a way that's beneficial to all of us. So if you're a baker, bake in a bakery, make a YouTube channel, put a recipe book together, start helping other people and educating them on how to bake, build your own personal brand. And now you've got 5 ways to make money. I've been watching this vlogger on YouTube, and she's in Sweden. She lives in the northern parts of Sweden, her and her husband, and she makes jewelry and art. And they've got 2 dogs. And every week she brings out a 10-minute video about her life, and she gets 8 million, 10 million views of video. And so if you think about it, she's making more money from an online persona than she is from a digital, from her art and from her jewelry. And so what is she? She's the new modern human, because the new modern human is not waiting for a job. The new modern human is not hoping to get a job or to, what should I study to be successful in the future? What we need to do now is we need to develop our own future, carve out our own way of adding value to the world and get out of the surplus market and job market that I think is disintegrating right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, so I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that obviously one of the major reasons I started Suits and Sneakers as an example was to showcase to the world this new world that we're moving into, that you could use things like the internet to learn anything about anything, anywhere, at any time, and virtually no cost. So the thing that you're really talking to me about, in fact, I am going to be speaking in the series a little bit later on in this What's the Future series. My talk is very much centered around 2 things, marketing in 2020 and value creation. And I think what you're pointing to is if you can understand the mindset that we've moved away from the Industrial Revolution to this brand new world, and this new world focuses on the value that you can offer more than anything. And you now live in a time, a space, an opportunity where you can learn anything, anywhere, at any time. So you can basically hack the system of value creation. And then you've got this internet, which is an incredible feedback loop. Do you know what I mean? You can use the internet very quickly to work out if the darts that you're throwing on the dartboard are working or not. And it's democratized not only entrepreneurship, it's democratized education, and it's democratized this notion that you talk about of.
Well, Mark, I think you and I are excellent examples of terrible students who've become successful in their lives from self-educating themselves. And so, you know, I often say to people, I lecture at universities. I've never been to university. And I've written books, and I was super cuck at writing essays at school, like really bad, not like a little bit bad, really bad. And so we realize that when we tap in to our curiosity, as Mark Twain said it, the 2 most important days of your life are when you're born and when you find out why. And when you find out why, that gives you an opportunity to dive so deep into the subject that you love, your unique factor, that the world starts to celebrate you in a very unique way. And so I always use myself as an example. I say, look, you know, I love human psychology, quantum science, neuroscience, futurism, and business strategy. And it's my favorite thing to do is to research these 5 subjects. Do you know who else loves these 5 subjects the same way I do? Nobody. So then I become unique in what I say and what I write and what I sort of share with the world. So uniqueness becomes your new currency in the world moving post-COVID-19.
Yeah, and to your point there, it costs you nothing to research those topics because the internet gives you a democratization of access to these things. Yeah. Just for time's sake, I want to go on to our last part, and then we're going to go to Q&A. I just want to remind all of you guys that are here, thank you so much. 2 things, that if you're going to make comments in the chat section, please make sure you are directing the comments to all panelists and attendees so everybody can see. Also, we'll be taking Q&A now shortly from the Q&A section. So I'm not going to be looking at the chat section for Q&A or questions. Please direct your questions specifically within the Q&A box. John, to close off with, from your end, talk to me, you've got 3 minutes before we go to Q&A. Talk to me about the future of leadership.
So look, there is no future of leadership. And I think we must become quite clear on that, because we have different types of leadership that are being birthed, and we need all different types. So let me give you this analogy. We are all in a home. Our home is burning on one side and is being in renovations on the other. And so what we need is leaders that can put out this fire, and we have leaders that can build the renovation. The mindset required for these 2 leaders is very different. And so what I always tell organizations is, look, are you leading in today's world, or are you leading in tomorrow's world? And if you're leading in today's world, you need to be hyper precise. You need to be dotting your I's and crossing your T's. You need to be meticulous in what you're doing. You need to be driven by efficiency and profitability. These are important in the today team. But if you're in the tomorrow team, you shouldn't be worried about economies of scale. You should be worried about economies of learning. How quickly can you unlearn to relearn? How quickly can you preempt what your customers want before they know they even want it? And so the leadership required here is bold, is robust, it's experimental, it's adaptable. Leadership here in the Today team, no, it's about efficiency. It's about preciseness. It's about the way you used to run a very well-oiled machine. So for me, leadership, you must stop stressing that you must be a type of leader. What sort of person are you? Or do you actually even want to be a leader? And if you want to be a leader, which type of leader are you most comfortable in? So I'm an excellent starter. I can start so many different projects. I can get them going. And if I don't have the right partners around me, those projects fizzle out because I'm a terrible leader when it comes to the precision of continuation. But I need partners that can do those for me. And then my partners in my businesses also have me on this side, bringing about the future, curating it, contextualizing it, and showing them which way we need to be building businesses. And this combination of leadership becomes the most powerful. So the most important thing with leadership for me is stop putting yourself under pressure to be all types of leaders. You can't be. Second question, do you actually want to be a leader? Third question, if you do, where do you want to be a leader? And all types of leaders are required in a world that's moving so quickly. And then what you do is you partner up with other people to be able to bring out those skill sets that you don't have.
Thanks, John. I just want to go, I want to just move over here. I think there's a great question here by Carl. So I'm going to call this being answered live. Carl asks, do you think that we need to relook our understanding and how we frame profit?
Yes, very well. Good question, bro. So here's my thing. And it's not just me, I'm watching obviously trends. In August 28th last year, Jamie Dimon, the CEO and chairman of Chase Bank in America, the largest bank in America, got together another 180 CEOs from around America, from the biggest companies, and said, look, guys, shareholders first, profit for shareholders only is not working. We are seeing that people in my bank, Chase Bank, as he said, can't afford to pay school fees and feed themselves. And our shareholders are becoming richer and richer. So they are rewriting the rules right now of a new economic system that says we don't want to prioritize shareholders, we want to prioritize stakeholders. And what stakeholders are made up of are employees, communities, shareholders, and consumers. And so profit then becomes divided into, are you looking after your employees? Are you giving your community what they need? Are you giving your shareholders what they need? And are being innovative enough for your consumer? And so this drive of growth over everything else is in fact childish. Nothing on earth works in summer all the time. Imagine earth was summer all the time. It's impossible. You need to be symbiotic. You need to feel and breathe and look at ways to contract and expand. So we need to redefine profitability into human, environmental, money, and consumer innovation. And so we are starting to see this happen all around us. And the best thing we can do as consumers is become consumer activists. Only work and buy from companies that are doing this. Starve those other ones out. So we have a very powerful opportunity as consumers to actually direct where we spend our money, to be able to pick up the brands that are doing this rather than the brands that are not. So the future does require us to become more conscious and more aware about how we spend and where we spend.
If you guys have read the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, he's got a beautiful way of framing profit. He says that profit is a lot like blood in the body. It's absolutely vital. I think we tend to talk about things in stereotypes like, profit doesn't matter. It absolutely matters, in the same way that if your body stopped producing blood, you would die. But if you sit any person down and ask them, what is the reason that you're alive? What do you want to do with your life? None of them will say, I live to make blood. And so if you can see that symbiotic relationship of blood is so vital to the body and it should never be ignored, but it's not the sole purpose of why we do what we do. John, one of the questions that's being asked a lot here is by people talking around those business models. I just want to shift to those very quickly. We've got about 5 minutes left. you mentioned those new business
Yeah.
models. Can you just give us
Sure.
an example of 2 or 3?
Yeah. So the first business model that we are seeing evolve is called the transformation business model. And the transformation business model is the next step from the experience business model. So remember back when Starbucks arrived and created the third space, that was an experience that we wanted to go into and experience coffee in a brand new way. But guess what? Every Tom, Dick, Harry, and his dog is now creating an experience. Markham's has got a smell. The one and only has got a smell. So now everybody's picked up on the experience economy. The next version of experience economy is called the transformation economy. What this means is you go in as a consumer and you are transformed when you come out on the other side. 2 examples, Africa Burn or Burning Man. These festivals are there, but when you come in and you leave, you're transformed as a human being. If you've never been to a festival, I highly recommend them because it totally changes the way you see the world and what you expect from the world. The second example is the gym brand, CrossFit. CrossFit is a transformational brand because you arrive on the one end, and when you finish with CrossFit, you're a much different human being. So we are looking at new ways to transform the actual human being rather than just experiencing, but transforming. The second business model we're starting to track is called the smartness business model. And the smartness business model is very similar to what happened with the electrical business model. At the turn of the 19th century, if you wanted to improve anything, you added electricity to it. So if you wanted a drill that worked better, you added electricity. A wash basket, a wash basin, you added electricity, it became a washing machine. And so today, what we are seeing is the smartness economy. Anything that you want to make better, you add artificial intelligence to it. So a phone becomes a smartphone, and a car becomes an autonomous car. And we're already starting to see lighting with artificial intelligence attached to it that determines your mood, or it picks up on your mood with facial recognition and changes the lighting inside your home based on artificial intelligence being attached just to a light. I mean, everything in the future will have artificial intelligence attached to it. And the third business model, which I've already mentioned, but I think one of the most powerful ones, is curate, match, and facilitate. We are living busy lives. We have got many, many things on the go. And what we want are brands that can make intelligent suggestions to us. And Amazon, obviously having more data on more customers than anybody in the history of humanity, are now starting to send, well, before COVID-19, we're using pockets of test pockets around the world, or in the States, I think, and parts of Europe, where they were sending 2 boxes to people's homes once a month. 1 box of the things they think you wanted, and 1 box that was empty. So whatever you didn't want, you just put into the empty box and sent back. In some test cases, they add up to a 70% hit rate of people accepting what was suggested to them. Because what we love and crave is brands that preempt what we want before we even know we want it. And then obviously, my favorite app on my phone is Spotify. It has changed my relationship with music, not because it's giving me choice of music. It's suggested music that I didn't even know was out there based on the things that I love. So curate, match, and facilitate. 1 business model. Smartness business model, making everything artificially intelligent, linked into artificial intelligence. And then obviously the transformation economy, which is now going to be replacing the experience business model.
Great. And then I guess one last question, because I think a lot of these, there's so many questions here, guys, but just for time's sake, I'm well aware that we can't go through all of these and set this context. A lot of people are asking this question around, and Shane Perrier brought it up, that COVID's brought about such dramatic levels of change, and that it almost feels like people aren't ready for this rate of change. And what are the things that people can do quite practically when they leave a webinar like today? What are the things that they can do to get themselves a bit more adaptive to the rate of change that we're currently experiencing?
So look, I mean, obviously it's a huge question and a great question, but ultimately this is 2030 that's arrived 10 years too early. And so all this change we thought was coming in 10 years, it's just arrived now. So ultimately, there's 2 things we need to do. Emotionally, we need to prepare ourselves. In other words, you are taking strain, your colleagues are taking strain, your family is taking strain, your staff are taking strain. And in any of these situations, what you have to do is manage your state. Because in the times of such movement and uncertainty, your state becomes the most important thing. Emotionally, are you meditating? Are you journaling? Are you going for energy healing? Just on an emotional level, how are you perceiving the world? On a mental level, how are you learning? How are you relearning? How are you growing? And when are you chilling? And on a physical level, are you moving? Are you eating enough great vegetables? Or are you making sure that your body's in a fit state? Because remember, we're in this time of uncertainty. We're in the middle of a storm. And the storm is wreaking havoc with all of our emotions and physicality and mentality. And so we have to manage our state. That's the first thing. Once we've managed our state emotionally, mentally, and physically, what are you doing to come out of this as part of the Renaissance? Stop waiting for things to go back to normal. Stop waiting for the economy to switch on again. Create your own. There's new ways for you to come at this. So look, I can see there's a lot of questions. What I suggest people to do is follow me on Instagram, ask me the questions on Instagram, and then I'll go through them systematically and try and answer as many of them as I can as possible. But yeah, I think that would be the best way to be able to answer as many of these questions as possible if we move it over to Instagram.
Absolutely. Look, John, you've been phenomenal. It's a crazy time because we're trying to make this thing work between two separate provinces. We've only really got 50 minutes to both set a context and then answer all these Q&As. But I really just want to kind of wrap up from our end in that the aim of what we're trying to do, and if I can like help you close off together, the things that I've taken as being part of the audience, because I'm sitting here in studio watching you, listening to you equally, is really that we've absolutely got to let go of the old. We've got to stop trying to run back to what we deem as normal. It's gone. You mentioned in one of your previous posts this idea of burning your ships, where you let go of it. You never look back and you pretend like normal is never coming back. And if normal is never coming back, what does the future look like? And I think it's so important to realize that how the story that we tell ourselves in our heads, the way we show up to difficulties mentally and emotionally matters everything. And then lastly, I think it's just so important to kind of understand that we live in, as you mentioned, a version of 2020 and 2030 combined. But we have this beautiful plethora of technology that for the most part brings about huge and massive abundance. We had almost 1,000 people attend today. That's technology at its best. And so there's all sorts of opportunities that opens up, but it starts with how we prepare our mindsets. Are we thinking about the future? Are we thinking about opportunity versus have we let go of the old? Are we thinking about the new? I've really learned so much from you equally. So what I want to say to all of you watching is this whole session has been recorded. And I really want to encourage you, because sometimes what happens with events is so much comes at you, and John might have mentioned a point to you, and then your brain starts going off in a different direction, and then you don't really hear what he's saying for the next 2 or 3 minutes. This is the beauty of technology. So in the next half day or so before tonight, we will send out an email to each and every one of you, letting you know about the recording with a link. And I really want to encourage you to take a little bit of that time to go and study this type of thinking. But hopefully this has just put you on a path. So John, from me to you, thank you so much. Can I give you perhaps 60 seconds, your final swan song, and anything that you want to end off and you want to say?
Yeah, good. I think, Mark, just like you, I think we are really focused on trying to help as many people as possible. And if everybody listening wants to go to my website, johnsanei.com/books, I've written 2 new ebooks called Future Now and Future How that are for free. I'm busy writing Future Next, and I've written them specifically to try and help people guide themselves into asking a new question, as well as answering their emotional state question. And then Future Next will try and determine how we can go about as consumers, business owners, and governance policymakers to rethink the future we have. So please go ahead, download those books. They're absolutely for free. Join me on social media, on Instagram and LinkedIn. Let me answer as many questions as you can. And just like Mark, I'm so enthusiastic to try and help as many people as I can, plus also improve my space and what value I bring to the world. So thank you so much for having me, Mark. And thank you for all of you joining us. It's been a great pleasure to be with all of you. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Awesome, man. Thanks, John. If you can just do me a favor and mute your microphone. We're not exactly done yet. John, thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you for giving up of your time. And I'm really excited. Guys, I hope from us to you, you've learned something. This is not the end of this yet. We've still got a few minutes of chatting a little bit further. What I really want to just do is close off with the context that what we were trying to do here, just having a look at how many people, what we were trying to do is try to create sessions like this. This is a bit more broad. right? What I asked John to speak about today was setting a broad context for people to understand the mental and emotional space. What we will be then doing is in the coming weeks, we can then dive into more detail, more practical, more, I guess, more like literal content. But my thinking has been for the longest time that if you don't start off by setting the right mental space, emotional space, if we don't understand context, where we've come from, where we are, where we're going, how to approach these things mentally, emotionally, physically, if we don't start there and we start straight with strategy and practical terms, there's so much that gets lost in the noise because of how we're feeling mentally and emotionally. So that's really what I want to set it to you, is that today is kind of setting a big context. The recording link is on its way to you. I really want to give a huge love to Amazon Web Services and Talk IT, who have made all of this possible. I want to just finish off by actually inviting Christian on here. If you can come join, we're looking over there. This is Christian, everybody. Why don't you just quickly say hi to Christian there in the chat section. Give him some love and say hello. Christian is directly he's a technical lead at Talk IT. And I've asked him just to come on board. I wanted to just hear a little bit of context from their end. What on earth made you follow through with a project like this where we didn't talk tech, we spoke broad? So tell us a little bit about what you were thinking.
Well, look, thanks. And thanks, John. Very informative. And I think that everybody that's been online with us and through the webinar has thoroughly enjoyed it and been very insightful. And it's been completely different to what anybody expects from two partners that are kind of AWS and Talk IT, which started 4 years ago. And from that perspective, it started, I think, with AWS having a bit of faith in us, having faith in the country and in Africa, and us having hope that this is going to go somewhere. And, you know, through that time and through this journey and almost become sort of a, you know, relationship that's become a fairy tale. And it sometimes feels like we're still in the honeymoon phase, you know, but it's growing regularly. And I think it speaks a lot of what yourself and John have spoken a lot throughout the day, you know, and through this morning. But talking about that, we need to transform. And AWS, instead of sitting back and saying, you know, what can we do for the customers, is saying, what problems do our customers have and how can we solve that? And that's one of the reasons why they're such a leader within the cloud space field is, you know, they're not only innovating in technology. If you look in COVID-19, they've got involved in the medical field and being able to give us and feed us these live results as they're available and on a daily basis as the testing goes on. Just to give a quick example is where I've really been impressed outside of the AI and all of the other services offered by AWS is the fact that when you look at the housing industry really suffered during this time. People are trying to sell houses, people are trying to rent houses, you know, and there's everything that goes with it. And AWS has created a platform for individuals to say, look, this is what we can do for you. This is how we can solve your problems. This is how we can provide viewing, for example, from the comfort of your home. So yeah, it's been a great opportunity for us to partner with AWS, partner with Suits and Sneakers as well, who's a well-established brand and a startup. And, you know, it's all about not only looking at the big companies, but also, you know, looking after the smaller businesses and so-called little guys, which aren't so little actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fascinating because what we did was we had this aim with, from a marketing perspective, when you and I got talking about this webinar event first, we said, I came up with this idea. I said, you know, how do we try to create content that first adds value? And I think that we've done that today, or we've tried our hardest to make sure that we are bringing content that hopefully gets people thinking differently. I think it's been a beautiful marketing strategy on your part, both Talk IT and AWS, to follow through with that. We're kind of living in this time right now where brands are equally in survivor mode. And so they jump for a sale. Like we go for like the quick sale as quickly as we can. And I really just want to say from us to you, I think you guys did so brilliantly for giving the conceptual space for us to play a much longer game with marketing and advertising, to rather create a lead of 5 weeks. How can we create content that helps people? So big love to both Talk IT and AWS. I think AWS is fairly well known in this space. Can I just give you perhaps 60 seconds? Do you mind just telling our audience a little bit about Talk IT?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And thanks for the opportunity. So from a Talk IT perspective, it's a business that's been around in South Africa for many years, and we do play in the greater Africa. And that being said, it's one of the largest IT training companies. And I think for me, that's where my passion has always been, and it's similar to what John said, you know, you're born and then you realize why you're born, and, you know, trying to study different things. And I studied from an engineer's perspective and all kinds of different fields. And I finally realized that education is my passion, and educating people and giving people knowledge that they can then use. And now when we live in these interesting times, I think an important thing to understand is, and again, going back to some of the things that were discussed through the webinar, is, you know, people have got this way of thinking so far ahead. So you come through high school, or you're in the middle of high school, and you must decide, what career am I going to go for? And in terms of that, if we look at where the landscape's going, especially in technology, it's not about just becoming a jack of all trades anymore. You need to know a million things. It's about specializing down into what's referred to as role-based certification. And, you know, Talk IT lies at the forefront of that, is providing people with that skilling or the opportunity to reskill themselves. And that being said as well, is to make them relevant in a time that is moving so quickly that it could be very daunting, or a lot of people are very anxious about what is next for them, or where do they have to go. And yeah, from a Talk IT perspective, you know, in the AWS relationship, it goes hand in hand, providing people with that knowledge, but also making them future fit in order to be able to survive in what we're going through at the moment.
Yeah, and I think there's never been a time that's more needed, where technology, I mean, just look at again what we've been able to do here. It's been fascinating. And so when I think about things like the cloud, when I think about general technology and understanding that it's clear that we're not just suffering from an inequality in a country like South Africa of just income inequality, but we've got a skills shortage. I know, for example, whenever we've tried to hire app developers, we have a woeful shortage of that type of thing. And so we're clearly moving into this tech space. I think this is a beautiful section where Talk IT and AWS come together. So just from a Suits and Sneakers perspective, from Suits and Sneakers to you guys, AWS, Talk IT, I just want to say thank you so much. Guys, I want to kind of jump in here quickly. I want to check in with you. If I just want to make sure that do you guys have any questions for Christian? Sorry, what I'm just trying to do is just make sure that I get onto here. Do you have any questions from an AWS perspective or a Talk IT perspective? We've still got about 700 people online, so it's quite a number. Thank you guys for staying online. Do you guys have any questions for Christian at all from a Talk IT perspective? There we go. And then also we've now got Bernadine, Bernadine, if you can hear us, Bernadine is from AWS directly. All you need to do is unmute let me just go do it and ask to unmute. If you can just unmute your camera and your microphone. Okay, so really what I just want to share with you while we wait for our third panelist to come on there is that the aim of what we were trying to do here today, just to give you a little bit of, is that Talk IT came through along with AWS, and they wanted to create a webinar series that really helped people on the other side. I think this is an excellent form of marketing, playing the long game, trying to give value before you take it. Obviously, the goal from an AWS and Talk IT perspective would be long-term to make more sales, grow the business. I think that's fair. The thing that we've been trying to figure out a way of is, how do we do this in an elegant way, a way that isn't shouting at people, in a way that isn't interrupting people. And so we've, kind of conceptually come up with this idea that let's create a webinar series over 5 weeks. Let's try pick a piece of content and speakers every week that really adds value to the broad perspective. And so we're employing this mentality that I have to share with you. It's called jab, 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 right hook. The idea is give, and then ask for some time and attention. So that's really been it from us. What I want to just do is bring, Bernadine's there. So guys, I just want to introduce you to Bernadine Jeffrey. Do you want to just say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself and who you represent?
Very good afternoon to you, John, and the rest of the panelists. Thank you so much for having us. My name's Bernadine Jeffrey. I head training and certification for AWS for the African region.
Awesome. Sorry, we're getting used to, you can see this is not about being perfect. We're just getting used to this very interesting studio setup. Thanks, Bernadine. This is great to have you on board. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about some of the really cool things that AWS has been doing, call it in the last few weeks / months with COVID. Do you have a story or two to tell us a little bit about the role that AWS has been playing? in the last few weeks?
Absolutely. When you look at how this pandemic has not only changed mindsets, but changed the methodology in which we actually work with our customers, how we deliver training, and looking at a workforce that is very much adapt to a very changing environment. We are rolling out hybrid models of learning with virtual training across all of our classroom offerings, offering very much the same look, feel, and value to our delegates, to our customers. And from an African standpoint, where customers weren't very accustomed to a very virtual offering, we now have our customers getting very used to this change in the methodology and how we roll out classroom training. And it's really becoming, you know, the forefront of how training is going to be adapted in the future.
That's excellent. Guys, what I really want to just do is we're going to kind of start closing off soon. So I really want to do one of two things to both you, Christian, and Bernardine, is I want to give you guys a little bit of time as the audience for a bit of Q&A. If you guys have any questions around, what we'll be doing is after the webinar, we'll be sending out some literature and material centered around both Talk IT and AWS. But I really want to give the floor to both you, Christian, and Bernardine. You guys have got 2 or 3 minutes each, just a message that you want people to know from your perspectives, from a Talk IT perspective, and then you, Bernardine, from an AWS perspective. So do you want to just start, Christian? Or do you want to
give Bernardine the floor there?
What are the things that you would love people to know just from an AW perspective? You've got an audience of about 550 people still. So please just let me give you the floor.
Thank you. So for us, what is becoming extremely prevalent is that we seed the market with skilled individuals. And with that in mind, Talk IT is one of our key partners. We're working with Talk IT, as well as the rest of our authorized training partners to ensure that we can seed the market with sustainable skills. We're doing so in terms of a number of different programs where we're working both with the seaters, working directly with our corporate customers, and ensuring that we can close that gap in the marketplace by having students actually get the relevant knowledge required for industry so that we close that gap. So for me, something that's really important is to get that message across that these programs are available. We look forward to working with you, and we look forward to ensuring that we seed the market with fantastic future skills.
Thank you so much. Christian, last word from you from a Talk IT perspective?
Last word for me, Mark, is that we're honored and privileged to have AWS as one of our leading partners. And that being said is, as Bernardine has pointed out, it's all about skills development, and especially in the country, and also looking after the youth. Unemployment is a massive problem within South Africa, and Talk IT and AWS in partnership are here to help the country to reskill, close the skills gap, but also to close the unemployment gap, especially amongst the youth. And the youth are our future leaders. So, very important to us as from a partnership perspective.
Guys, thank you so much. Both thank you to AWS and to Talk IT. I think there aren't any more questions. There's no need for us to kind of drag it along. I just want to finish off by just saying thank you. Number one, first and foremost, to Talk IT. Pardon me? Yes, of course. The one thing I want to bring your attention to very quickly is our next speaker, being next week, is a good friend of mine named Eric Kruger. As you can see, his topic there, leadership in transit. He'll both be talking about this idea of how leadership, being very specific about leadership, but also how do we build teams in 2020 with COVID coming on board, whether you are part of a team at work, whether you're wanting to build a team. How does this look like? What is things like the difference between us working remotely and us working from an office? How do we handle this building of teams and leadership in transit? So just from me to you, from Suits and Sneakers to AWS to Talk IT, I just want to say thank you so much to each and every one of them. I want to just say thank you to you guys. I just want to give you big love for stepping on today, for being part of this experiment. That's really what it was. I think as the weeks roll on, we will get more and more slicked out with the process. I really want to just say thank you to each and every one of you for being part of this. Don't forget that we have a link to the recording so you can watch in detail the things that John spoke about. Thank you so much, guys. That's it from us to you. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for your time. We'll be touching base with you in the next few hours, both about the link for today and next week, the event with Eric. Please help us spread the word. It really would mean the world to us. Thank you so much for your time and attention. That is us. Over and out. I'm going to press the end button. Thanks, guys. Say cheers to me. Say cheers already. All right, guys. There we go. I love it. Thank you for being part of this. Cheers, guys. I'm closing this. I'm ending. Goodbye.